Good day, everyone. Today we are going to discuss Module 3, which is entitled Sampling and Data Collection. Group 3 presenters is composed of yours truly, Salvador C. Ramirez, Ms. Nicy O. Casin, Mr. Jobert R. D. Maano, Mr. Josh Brian M. Narvaez, and Mr. Napoleon P. Sansaman Jr. Start with the introduction. Guided by the knowledge and statistics, students must also become accustomed to the process of sampling. This module is intended to familiarize students with the different types of sampling and the theory that guides the process. Learning objectives. At the end of the module, the students must be able to conduct the following. A. Differentiate the types of sampling. Letter B. Understand the theory behind sampling. And letter C. Use sampling in the business context. History of sampling. Sampling is defined as a process or method of drawing a representative group of individuals or cases from a particular population. This is according to the Encyclopedia Britannica of 2017. This process is associated with the fact that it is more effective and efficient to study samples taken from a population, much like the history of statistics. The history of sampling has various roots. According to Bethlehem, he reiterated that sampling theory became a legitimate area of study in statistics through the works of Andres Kier of the Norwegian Statistical Bureau. So Anders Kier is actually the one who developed the representative method. So we are going to give him all the credits on how the representative method or sampling was created. Here is a timeline of the representative method or the method of sampling. 1895. Anders Nikolai Kier, born on 1838 and died on 1919. In his published study in 1895, Kier presented his representative method of selecting samples based on the population. The representative method received both praises and criticisms of scholars, and these promoted Kier and other statisticians to address and improve the method. So a while ago, we talked about the history of the sampling, and Anders Nikolai Kier is actually the one who invented or presented the representative method. So we give him the credits. And on 1906, Arthur L. Bowley, born on 1869 and died at 1957. The representative method's lack of random selection was improved by Bowley in 1906. The works of both Kier and Bowley led to the rise of probability and non-probability sampling. So in this part, we need to give also the credit to Arthur L. Bowley. So Kier and Bowley actually have different methods, but they were able to come up with just two methods, which is the probability and non-probability sampling, which we will talk about later on. So before we proceed to the types of sampling, let's start first with the population. So the population is the whole group that you want to draw conclusions about. So the population, these are the people who will participate in your research or the research that you are conducting. And then the population, this is the entire community. For example, in our school, DLSP or PLSP now, if there are 5,000 students, then the entire population would be 5,000 students. And then the next one is the sample. The sample is a certain group of individuals that you will collect data from. So, for example, we have 5,000 students in the LSP, and we need at least 1,000 participants. So that 1,000 participants, it's either will come from the first years, the second year, the third year, or the fourth year, or it can be per department from the College of Business and Hospitality or from the College of Teacher Education. So the sample will be depending on what group they belong. Next is sampling frame. The sampling frame is the verified list of individuals that the sample will be drawn from. So remember, our population a while ago is 5,000 students in the LSP. So you will just choose a frame wherein you selected at least 200 out of the 5,000. So that's going to be the frame of your population. And then the next is the sample size. Sample size is the number of individuals you must include in your sample depending on various factors, including the size and the variability of the population and your research design. So, depending on the research design that we will be using, if it's going to be qualitative or quantitative method. So, in qualitative, we just need at least 10 students out of the 5,000. Or if we're going to do a quantitative research, then we need at least 100 or more or less students coming from that 5,000 student.
Probability of samplings. The use of probability sampling is guided by the probability theory, particularly the law of large numbers and the central limit theory. The assumption is that as the numbers of samples selected from the population increases, the likelihood that the statistic obtained from these samples become closer to the expected or actual values from the population and will follow a normal distribution. And probability samplings, every member of the population has a chance of being selected. It means kahit nasa pinakang last na barangay ka pa or pinakang last na section, may chance ka pa din na maging part ng study or maging respondents nila. It involves principle of randomization or chances. May ginagamit tayong process para sa lahat ng members ng population natin ay mayroong chance na makasali o maging part ng study natin. It is mainly used in quantitative research. Simple random sampling. And simple random sampling, the researchers only implements a selection that ensure that every members of the population has an opportunity to be selected. Sa method na 'to, kitang-kita natin yung chances na makakasama yung ibang tao sa study natin saka yung randomization. It is sometimes called fish bowl. Ito yung applicable na technique sa maliit na population. Pero 'pag malaki naman, pwede naman gumamit ng iba pang method katulad ng roulette wheel technique para maiwasan natin yung bias sa pamimili ng example, you want to select a simple random sample of 1,000 student of VLSP. You assign a number to every student in the school database from 1 to 1,000 and use a random number generator to select 100 numbers to become your respondents. Pwede natin gamitin yung fishbowl technique na sinabi ko kanina. Ito yung isusulat natin yung pangalan ng bawat respondent sa isang papel tapos magpapawalabunutan para maiwasan natin yung bias. Or pwede naman yung roulette wheel technique, use of table of random number pag malaki na yung population na respondents natin. Stratified sampling. This is probability sampling technique where heterogeneous group was further classified into homogeneous groups or strata, where the samples will be selected. The number of samples selected per stratum corresponds to the percentage of the stratum to the entire population. Strata is chosen to divide the population and categories relevant to the research interest. This sampling method, as termed also kata-random sampling. When we talk about the stratified random sampling, it involves the division of the population into different strata or subgroups. Isa sa maganda about dito is it allow us to organize our group based on similar characteristic and similar attributes. Example, the school has 600 female students and 200 male students. You want to ensure that the sample reflect the gender balance of the school. So you sort the population into two strata based on gender. Then you use random sampling on each group, selecting 80 women and 20 men, which give you a representative sample of 100 people. What we need to do is we would pick randomly and we can set whatever we want.
Is cluster sampling. So cluster sampling, this type of probability sampling techniques is similar to stratified sampling. The only difference is that not all of the strata are selected. Instead, the researcher will first select a number of strata from which the sample will be randomly taken from. So dun sa cluster sampling, so sinasabi doon yung ang ang sampling technique na ito ay katulad lang sa stratified sampling. Ang pagkakaiba lang ay hindi lahat ng strata ay pinipili or napili. So sa halip, ang isang manaliksik ay pipili muna ng isang strata kung saan ang pagpili ng isang strata ay random. Example, so example, PLSP has 10 officers across the campus, all with roughly the same number of students is similar roles. You don't have the capacity to travel to every office to collect your data. So you use random sampling to select three offices. These are your clusters. So ang ibig sabihin nun ay example, merong 10 opisina na sa buong campus. So lahat ay may halos parehong bilang ng mga mag-aaral na may katulad na mga tungkulin. So, ibig sabihin, wala kang kakayahang maglakbay sa bawat opisina para kolektahin yung mga data. Kaya pwede tayong gumamit ng random sampling para pumili ng tatlong opisina para dun ilagay lahat yung data. So next is systematic sampling. In systematic sampling, selection of samples starts from a random point and will be carried over based on a fixed interval. Some researchers conduct systematic sampling by generating a random number that will serve as the starting point and the interval. So, ang systematic sampling naman ay ito yung magsisimula muna sa random point. So, magsisimula sa random points at saka pagpili ng mga sample at magdadala batay sa isang fixed interval. So, may ilang mananaliksik na magsasagawa ng systematic sampling sa pamamagitan ng pagbuo ng random number. So, ang random number ay magsisilbing punto at magiging at pagsisimula ng mga interval. Another example, so all students of PLSP are listed in alphabetical order from the first 10 numbers. You randomly select a starting point, number 4, from number 4 onwards. Every 10% of the list is selected for 14, 24, 34, and so on. And you end up with a sample of 100 people. So, doon naman sa example, so, ibig sabihin, ang lahat ng mag-aaral ng PLSP ay nakalista sa alpabetong pagkasunod-sunod. So, mula sa unang sampung numero, random na pipili ng panimulang point. So, mula sa numerong 4, pataas bawat sampu sa lista, ika-10 tao sa listahanan ay pipili ng 4, 14, 24, 34 at iba pa. So at magkakaroon ka dapat ng 100 taong sample. So in the last is multi-stage sampling. So this is the combination of the probability sampling techniques mentioned above. So uh, ito po yung mga kasama ng mga probability sampling technique na nabanggit kanina sa itaas. Thank you.
Multi-stage sampling is also defined as divides large population into stages. To this sampling, we use stratified sampling or cluster and simple random sampling. It is all used in this sampling. Ang example po ng multi-stage sampling ay all survey on drug use in high school use three stages. I-divide po sila sa three stages. Geographic areas, followed by high school, followed by senior student in this school. Parang yung bawat stage, ayun mas mapapadali yung study natin pag ginamitan na natin ang bawat stage yung respondents natin.
Non-probability sampling. This type of sampling is used when researchers are not concerned about generalizing the result of the study to the population. Instead, the researchers only aims to get data for specific cases. Non-probability sampling techniques are often used in exploratory and qualitative research. Ito po yung ginagamit ng mga researchers kapag sila ay walang concern sa pag-generalizing tungkol sa naging resulta ng research. Ang researchers po ay kailangan lamang na manaliksik at makakuha ng mga information o data para sa kanilang specific na cases. At kadalasang ginagamit po ang non-probability sampling sa exploratory and qualitative research.
Kung sa probability samplings, umaasa tayo sa chances to get our sample, sa non-probability sampling naman, mas mayroong hawak o mas may control yung ating researcher.
Quota sampling. In quota sampling, the researcher only ensures that a number of samples will be selected from all the strata. Ang quota sampling na po ay ang mga researchers ay kailangan ma-ensure ang bilang ng samples na napili nila sa lab.
For our quota sampling, ang concern natin dito is yung proportion of group of our population. It is somehow similar to stratified sampling kasi hinahati natin yung population into certain groups. Pero iniisip natin yung proportion nila.
For example, a businesswoman found out that the customers base of her cosmetic company is composed of Caucasian, Asian, Black, and Latino women, age 20 to 30. She sets to survey 10 women from each race. Example na po, yung business ng babae ay mga cosmetics at ang kaniyang mga customers ay puro babae sa iba't ibang lahi. So ang ginawa niya po ay nagawa po siya ng survey sa bawat babae sa iba't ibang lahi. Purposive sampling is the selection of participants on the premise that they met the criteria of the researcher. Snowball or chain sampling is an example of purposive sampling. Ang purposive sampling po ay ang pamilihan ng bawat participant sa premise na nakakita yung criteria ng researchers. Tapos ang snowball or chain sampling ay halimbawa lang ng purposive sampling. So ang alam naman po natin na ang purposive sampling ay also known as judgmental, selective, or subjective sampling is a form of non-probability sampling kung saan ang researchers po ay nag-judge gamit ang kanyang sariling opinion kapag nakapili na yung mga kanyang kasamahan na mga participant sa kanilang survey. For example, you want to compare and contrast the manufacturing practices of Japanese companies in the Philippines. Given the specificity of your purpose, your study does not ensure random selection. Instead, you will be driven more by the criterion in the selection of your sample. Ito, halimbawa na kailangan ay makompare at makontrast ang pagmamanufacturing ng mga Japanese companies sa Pilipinas. So, binigay yung specificity na study na hindi nag-ensure randoms na pagpili, kundi higit ka ng pamantayan sa pagpili ng iyong sample.
Snowball sampling. If the population is hard to assess, snowball sampling can be used to recruit participants via other participants. The number of people you have assessed to snowballs as you get in contact with more people. So it means, para po tayo ay magkaroon ng connection or ibang contact sa maraming tao, makikipag-coordinate po tayo sa mga taong may kaalaman or medyo may matataas na posisyon upang magkaroon tayo ng connection sa iba pang tao na under nila. Example, you are researching for carpenter in your city. Since there is no list of all carpenter in the city, probability sampling is not possible. You meet one person who agrees to participate in the research, and he put in you a contact with other carpenter he know in the area. So, dito nga po, kung sa ako po, engineer, for example, engineer po ako, then may project po ako sa area na ito. Ang kukontakin ko po is yung foreman na kakilala ko. And then, si foreman naman po ang bahalang humagilap or kumuha ng mga carpenter na kakailanganin ko para sa aking project na gagawin sa area na to. Si foreman din po ang kukuha ng mga mason or mga skilled and mga labor na kakailanganin para mabuo or matapos ang project na gagawin ko. Convenience sampling. Convenience sampling relies solely on availability. So, ibig sabihin, ito pong convenience sampling na ito po ay umaasa lamang sa availability or sa kung ano ang meron. For example, a chef hands over a survey form to every customer who eat in his restaurant to determine the level of satisfaction on the product and services. So dito nga po pumapasok yung convenience sampling. Umaasa lang po si chef sa kung anong merong product or dishes na meron siya. To determine what kind of dishes na best seller niya, gumawa po siya ng survey form upang malaman kung ano ba talaga ang pinaka-best seller niya. And then doon sa mga product na hindi niya masyadong nabebenta, ayun naman po yung gagawa niya ng paraan upang ito ay mas mapataas ang sales or mas mapaganda ang quality ng product na hindi masyadong mabenta.
And to wrap this up, that's it for our presentation. If you have questions regarding our topic, feel free to ask after this video presentation. Once again, thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Bye.